Greetings, citizen. Welcome to the show, and thank you for listening. For more of the art of wargaming in your life, definitely check us out on Instagram and Facebook. If you'd like to support the show, we have a Patreon account where you can do just that for as little as $1 a month. What we can offer will expand as the show does. If you don't have extra funds but would still like to help us out, you can give us a like, share, or 5-star review wherever you listen to podcasts. Want to get in touch? Feel free to message us or hit up our email, artofwargamingpodcast@gmail.com. We look forward to continuing the conversation with you because we know the world is vast, with many different ideas on tactics and strategy that can be applied to the games we enjoy.
You're listening to the Art of Wargaming on the Ear Firm Network.
Battle for the Ring. A Knight's Trail.
Welcome to the Art of Wargaming on the Earworm Network. I am Yaga Malark. Today we're going to be talking about a Knight's Trail. But before that, let's talk a little bit about Bifter. Battle for the Ring, or Battle for the Rain, as this one is taken to being called. Let me just preface it by, I love this event. It's one of my absolute favorite events. I enjoy making it down for it when I can. But, as with anything else, you're rolling the dice. You know, this event takes place right in the middle of California's rainy season. Like when they're getting their rain and their weather that, I mean, like they've been in a drought for a while, but this is normally the rainy season time. And so we certainly got some of that, but so I got in there a couple days early, and it was nuts because there were so many roads that were just washed out. Those of you from that area of the world may be used to such phenomena, but to see an entire road under siege by like 10 feet of mud was unreal. Just unreal. I'm not quite sure I've ever seen anything like that, and it made things ridiculous coming in out of the Palm Springs area because of the 5 thoroughfares that moved through there. 3 of them were coated in this mud, or covered in this impassable mud, which made travel difficult, as we've studied. Such things are important for logistics. But so we got there, and originally when we had looked at it, the weekend before was supposed to be fairly nasty, and then it was supposed to be, kind of whatever that next weekend, but manageable. Well, as we were getting closer and closer to it, I began to realize that little bit of weather that we thought we were going to get wasn't just going to be a little bit. It was going to be a lot. So when we first got there, that first, we had the setup day, of course, but that first day of being there, I don't know, I had this feeling, or I had a desire to be on the field or whatever, but I just felt this fire pushing me. And so I went onto the field, and I felt like a young man again. I was out there for about 6 hours of actual fighting. 8 hours I was going to say because that's the amount of time that I was up and about, but I would say for maybe 2 hours of rest or getting water or food. But otherwise I was on that field with my brand new ultra super light, just bombad red, just going to town and enjoying myself thoroughly. Oh, it was wonderful. And even though there was quite a bit of mud, and I took a few headshots, and every headshot I took I felt was purely accidental because I saw the person slip. They pulled the power out of the shot, and then it just kind of went boop. Everybody's like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I hit you in the head. And I'm like, it's slippery. Very, very slippery out here, and you're trying your best. So I appreciate that, but I don't normally throw shade on this show, but there's one particular individual, and if anybody knows me, you'll know who I'm talking about. He's a particular thick fighter, perhaps even called the Thick Fighter from the Midwest, who I despise. Everybody, a lot of people in the sport seem to look up to him. He teaches classes and everything, and I say, if you're a renowned cheater, why does anybody listen to you? But people do, so I guess that's their prerogative. But this individual has pissed me off so many times in the past because of just sloughing shots. Yeah, he's one of those people that if you hit his arm and his hand, both with sufficient force, he will call hand. He will just straight up slough shots from people that he doesn't think that he should take them from. And it does it all with this smug look of just superiority. Oh my gosh, I despise this man, and he has cheated against me my entire career. He has upset me my entire career every time I've met him, except for this event. And I don't usually consider I try not to be a petty person, and I try not to be motivated by thoughts of vengeance. But as some of you may know, even though it's considered bad form, we don't have a maximum hit calibration in Belegarth. There is nobody who says, you swung too hard. We don't have that. Like, we have lights, but we don't have a maximum hit calibration, not in our rules. So I went to town. Every time I met this guy, I cranked it back, and I made sure to hit him pretty dang hard, and as many times as I needed to, because the number of times that I thought I got this guy, and he just sprang right back and was like, haha, no you didn't. So I just beat him literally into the mud on a few occasions, just beat him down, and it was so satisfying. So deeply satisfying to have a despised, I wouldn't even call him rival, because to be a rival he would have to not cheat constantly. You understand though? so yeah, that was amazing. Just that by itself was a fantastic thing. But I was out there, fought my heart off, and then rain came. And I've lived in Tennessee before, so I've seen rain. I'd seen even this amount of rain before, because hurricanes that were dying and had kind of, spent themselves over the coast and were moving through as a larger weather system. We got tons of rain in Tennessee for sure, winds and all that. But Tennessee is prepared for it. The ground is prepared for it. And so what we were finding there was that the ground is hydrophobic. For anybody who hasn't been in that region of the world, it means that the sand, it's primarily a sand-based soil, gets so compacted from the heat and from the wind that it just doesn't accept water. The water hits it and rolls off of it like a duck's back. So when you have that level of water coming down out of the sky, that's why it's dangerous. That's why you get these flash floods and these landslides and everything, is because the ground is just not made at the moment, because of the drought and whatnot, to handle it. So very quickly the camp turned into a marsh. And I mean a literal marsh, where in many places if you step down, your foot was covered by water, like submerged. And this is within a matter of minutes. A matter of minutes when it really started coming down. And we were located, like my particular tent, we were located on a little bit of a hill, so we weren't in the direct marsh. But to get anywhere, I had to cross the marsh that I had taken to calling the Dead Vole Marsh. And the reason I called it the Dead Vole Marsh was because of all the dead voles. The water had come down so quickly and so powerfully that it had drowned voles, which are these, if you don't know what they are, they're small rodents, in their burrows and washed them out. So that these little rodents were just floating dead in the water. It was very unnerving. And of course, it's sad. It's sad to see that kind of thing happen, but it was also just unnerving to be walking through it. And I had to walk through that to get anywhere, basically, that area of the world. So we could have stayed. My tent was good, and every time I stopped by it, it was still dry on the inside, so we could have stayed. But many of us chose not to. I mean, there were those brave souls, and many of you are probably listening right now going, oh, you are one of those. But I wasn't. I spent every piece of energy I had that Thursday out on the field. I was in so much pain from there on out. So leaving and going into town, I considered that a tactical withdrawal, because I wouldn't have been any use anyways. I mean, that you'll hear some of the interviews I was able to pick up. I was very glad to grab my interviews before the real deluge started coming. So a good portion of the event got rained out, but that wasn't anybody's fault. The portions that I attended were very nice, and even though the event was underwater for the latter half of it, for a good portion of it, they still did everything they possibly could to keep morale up. There were some really cool parties that happened. The tournaments still went off for the most part. There was a lot of really cool things that they did to keep the morale up. So I have to take my hat off to them, and they made the best of a bizarre situation. There were people on site who had campers and everything, and they had a pretty good time, I reckon, just because of the insulated dryness that they had. But yeah, it was an interesting. I would totally do it again. I guess is what I'm boiling it down to. Despite the discomfort, the pain of having overexerted myself that first day, and then having that be kind of compounded by the weather, still with the people I got to meet and hang out with, my old friends who I got to see that one glorious day of combat, it was all worth it. It was all 110% worth it. So I would do it again. We're going to have an episode here coming up where we're going to talk to some folks who are intimately involved in the planning and conduct of an event, including Sir Anastasia, who has impressed me yet again with a fantastic event. So, Sir Anna, if you are listening, thank you again for having, at the very least, providing an excuse for us poor Montanans to come down to Southern California in the middle of the winter. So yeah, let's get into these interviews, though. One of the series I was able to conduct, because there were a lot of knightings at this particular event, was I wanted to talk about, as you may have noticed, this little pun, play on words, a knight's trail. How one becomes a knight, how one goes along the path of peerage, and the knighthood is the most common one. There's a lot of other points of peerage, including my own, which is the prophet system, which is a greater part of the Great Hunt. We use the Great Hunt as a good portion of our foundation. All of this stuff can be found on Geddon, by the way, geddon.org. But the peerage system is huge. It's instrumental to Belegarth, and it means something, or at least it's supposed to mean something. And in times past, it has been a way for folks to stroke their egos, if they wanted to stroke their egos in such a way. But in more recent years, it has become far more reflective of what it should be. Service. Thinking of others before ourselves. Thinking of the community before ourselves. And doing the best we can to not only ensure its survival, but the enjoyment and the joy, just pure joy, of people coming in, the hard work. That's what the knights and other peerage folks should be doing, is the hard work to earn that particular title, to earn that chain that is worn, which is also seen as a burden of responsibility. So what we have today are three separate individuals walking this knight's trail. The first one you will hear is Squire, now Sir, Keelik, as he prepares to make the transition himself. He has done everything he has needed to do. He has completed his list, he has walked his path, and he is very close, as the time of this interview, to achieving his title. And so we get to speak to him about what it feels like, that anticipation, being on this end of the journey. And the second person we're going to talk to, Dame Freya, is somebody who just received their knighthood. Beautiful ceremony, by the way. I'm not sure if any of you were there, but it was absolutely gorgeous. And it was just an absolute treat to get to participate in it. Saruna, I also wanted to interview for this section, because she and Dame Freya were both knighted in the same ceremony. Saruna is a difficult person to track down. They're very busy. And at the event, they were running security, so that made them hard to find at the event. And, now we're outside of the event, and they have a lot of real-world stuff going on. So eventually, we'll have Saruna on as well, because I really want to get her perspective. But for this episode, we have Sir Freya talking about the journey's end and what comes next. The elation, the relief, the responsibility that now sets in. All these are things that rest upon the mind of a new knight. And lastly, we'll hear from Sir Juggernaut, the Bard. As I've taken to call him, the Happy Papa. The man who had his two squires elevated to knights, and gave a beautiful speech on it, by the way. Again, that ceremony was amazing, and when I found out that it was just somewhat cobbled together at the last second, I was like, oh my gosh, of course. The most perfect things are sometimes, right? they're not even planned. But the man has a great speaking voice, a great presence. You'll really love this interview. But talking to him about, history, he provides a really interesting history of West Coast peerage. But he has his perspective of what it feels like to have guided two members of the community, two excellent members of the community, to this position, and watching them succeed, watching them truly flourish. Well, it's a treat. It's a treat. I share it with my own apostles, just this watching them grow, watching them become not just better fighters, not just better people, but also better members of the community, more devout in their service. So we're going to speak with him about what it feels like to raise up two quality individuals like this, and perhaps what that means for the future. So I invite you, please, to sit back as we talk to these three individuals and determine the path and the steps along the Knights Trail. With me right now is Squire Keelik. Keelik, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. It's a very big day for me, and I'm happy to be here and happy to be a part of such a wonderful community and at such a wonderful, wonderful event.
I do love Battle for the Ring. It is one of my absolute favorites. An excuse to go to Southern California in the middle of winter at the very least. But it's so much more than that, right?
I absolutely agree with that. I'm coming down from Central Oregon, and we have not as extreme as Montana, but definitely some harsh winter conditions. And so coming down where it's warmer is always a pleasure. No snow at this event ever.
I know. It's wonderful. Well, you can see it in the mountains on occasion, but that's the mountains. And
Yeah, but you need some binoculars.
Very true. Well, you are up and coming. You are just about to receive your knighthood.
I am.
But before we really get into that, would you like to tell the listeners a little bit about your sword fighting pedigree? Like, when did you start?
I would gladly. So I started in 2008, so I'm coming on 14, almost 15 years of this being my entire life. I was introduced to Belegarth when I was living in southern Utah by just a coworker. I was working at a call center, and one person was like, "Hey, I know that you like to go to Renaissance fairs and you've done like martial arts stuff, and you're obviously a D&D nerd. I do this thing. Is that something that you would like to come and try?" And it sounded horribly nerdy. But I was like, you know what? Yeah, let's try it. Try anything once sort of thing.
Sure.
And I came out and I fell in love. The first time that I did this on that scale was just a remarkable experience. And then I eventually went to my first event and realized that it was so much bigger than I even thought then. And then bigger events and meeting better fighters and just the whole experience. There's so much, and it has been my life.
What units have you been a part of? Realms?
So as far as units, my first experience with a unit was with the Chaos Guard in Idaho. I was a little bit of a special thing because I wasn't living in Idaho. I wasn't part of the Highlands of Chaos. But they were looking at that time to try and expand out. That unit, of course, is now defunct and is no longer around. But it was a place where I first felt a level of camaraderie and involvement that was really uplifting. After that, I have been honorary horde, but other than that, I haven't done any other unit activity.
Right on.
As far as realms, I've been part of 3 different realms. I started in southern Utah, as I said, in the little town of Cedar City. The realm there was called Ianga Emin.
Okay.
Which is no longer there. Everyone kind of moved away, and it kind of collapsed in on itself. And I was one of those ones that moved away, and found myself in northern Utah, in the Provo area where Erduath is, and spent a few years there, and really came to find a lot more of the organization there. After that, I moved to Central Oregon for a young lady that I met in Belegarth.
Is that your wife now?
Yes, and we met at Chaos Wars. It was an amazing experience meeting Sarka at Chaos Wars. I was living in Utah, she was living in Oregon, and we started this long distance thing. And I went out there, I met her family, and she came and visited me, and it became very clear very fast. This long distance thing, 700 miles, is not going to work.
Right.
And so am I going there, or are you coming here? And I wound up moving to Oregon and have been there for over 10 years with the love of my life. We have 3 dogs and a wonderful, almost 2-year-old together, and
Those dogs you're hearing in the background, by the way, are these lovely dogs to speak of.
we have those are my huskies, Nehru and Desna. The one you're hearing is definitely Desna. She has her voice.
Chatty creatures.
Yes.
So the thing you did last night, and the thing I'm coming late to because I crashed out early like a noob, was something called a vigil. Now, this might not be something that a lot of our listeners are familiar with, so would you mind explaining kind of what a vigil is and what the purpose of it is?
Gladly. So a vigil is basically where I come into a space that is public access and allow members of the community to approach me and offer their congratulations and support, but also bring me any concerns that they might have about the state of the community. Where someone can come to me and say, I'm noticing a real increase in the way that we treat our in the negative ways that we treat our volunteers, and what do you, as somebody who is an up and coming pillar of the community, have to do with solving these issues? How can you, with the new title that you are getting, help? What do you and where do you fall on this issue? And it's just a wonderful opportunity to have that sit down and talk about the whole spectrum, and things aren't going to get resolved in a night, obviously.
Of course, yeah.
But as somebody who's being brought into that leadership role, to be made directly aware of the concerns of the people is great.
Sure. No, and it gives you a good idea of what you might need to address going forward. Like
Exactly.
As you're coming into your knighthood, what issues are there to press forward on, right?
Yes.
So how is the vigil done?
So
Do people come in and all ask you the same question, or is there drinking games? What is a vigil?
a lot of people will do it very differently. There's no set one way to do it. You definitely get asked the same questions a lot. Most of us are aware of the same issues that are happening.
Sure.
There are definitely questions that happen at every single vigil. What does knighthood mean to you? How do you plan on using your new title to better the community? For me, a lot of what I wanted to do with my vigil was to offer gifts to those who came and share my enthusiasm for our organization. For 14, 15 years of doing this, and I want people to see the enthusiasm that exists within those who stick around.
Sure. Well, you're coming to the end of your squireship. Is there anything that you would like to tell our listeners about the process of squireship, maybe some of the challenges they might be seeking on this end of this of your journey?
Yeah, that was a question that I got asked a few times last night. Was what is the most important thing you feel is to be communicated to somebody who's looking to get into peerage, who wants to become a squire and eventually a knight? And the best advice that I could think to give is find a knight who you have a mutual respect for, that you can say, I respect you, and you respect me, and we have so much that we can learn from each other. Knights are just people, and we have gone through all of these experiences, but you've gone through experiences that I haven't, and we are so eager to grow, all of us. And so finding somebody that you feel that camaraderie with, that you can grow together, I think is the best thing. I went through 2 nights before I found Acrid. Acrid is a wonderful mentor for me, but that was what we really talked about on day 1 when I started with him was I feel that you and I have something special as a friendship. We've known each other for years. We've fought in side by side and against each other. And I think that on a combat level, we have a lot that we can teach each other. On a real world level, I think that we are a wonderful pair to learn from each other's experiences.
Well, right on. I'm looking forward to your knighting.
Thank you.
I am absolutely intending to be there because I've watched you grow, and not just as a fighter, not just as a member of the community, but as a person. Just as we all do. If we're not growing as people, what are we doing with this life? Just one final question on that matter. Were you and your knight in the same realm or the same geographic area, or were you removed from one another?
We were very removed. As I said, I live in Oregon, and he lives in Vegas, and that's 1,000 miles.
Right.
And we only see each other on average twice a year, typically at Battle for the Ring and at Chaos Wars, and that's hard.
Right.
But we live in the modern age, and while we are doing old-timey wacky bats, we also have the internet in our pocket.
That's true.
And our ability to coordinate and plan for big activities when we do meet each other has never been easier. And I appreciate Acrid's enthusiasm for staying connected and staying in communication with me on a regular basis.
Seems like it would be very important for the process.
It is, especially for, just the daily check-ins, not daily, but the routine check-ins for, hey, what are you doing in your local realm? What are you doing in town to promote the thing? And that holds me accountable to be like, am I doing the thing for my community on a local level? And that's important.
Sure. I think so as well, by the way. I've always, for me, the sport, the community begins in the realm. The realm is the most important part of it, because if we don't have strong, healthy realms, we can't have a strong, healthy, wider community.
Exactly.
And so I agree with you that the first duty of a knight, the first duty of anybody who's a part of peerage, is to their people. Well, Squire, soon to be Sir Keelik, I appreciate you very much for talking with me today.
I appreciate the offer. It's wonderful to be here with you. I hope to see you on the field in the rain. We'll see how bad that gets.
And I will absolutely be there at your ceremony this evening. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
I'm sitting here with Dame Freya the Relentless. Dame Freya, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for asking me to be here and talk to you today. It's an honor.
Well, I wanted to for several different reasons. One, I have known of you for a while and the kind of dedication that you've brought to our community, and so I was already like, I want to find that Freya person. I heard you were receiving your title, and I was like, I definitely got to find Freya now, because I got 2 reasons. So yeah, I'm just pleased as punch that you could come on.
But before we get into the process that you've just gone through, let's hear a little about your fighter pedigree.
So I've been fighting for about 9 years. I was a squire for 5 years. Actually was a retainer to Juggy before he got knighted, and then once he got knighted about 5 years ago, then I became his squire. I am from the Northern California realm of Ceracore in the Bay Area. I am not currently part of a unit or house or anything like that. Actually, it's something I would like to look into in the future, but I haven't really had time for that, and I kind of wanted to give myself time to work on my squireship and all that before I overloaded myself with too many things.
Sure.
So that's something possible in the future. I am mostly a sword and border, but I also have done archery. I've had a couple injuries that led to me being an archer for a while, but archery is also fun, and so those are my two styles. I have dabbled in other styles, but
Sure.
haven't really stuck to it as much. I just love fighting sword and board.
Well, and if any of you know of Dame Freya, you will have just taken notice that not associated with the unit could be associated with the unit, so keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Well, that's just outstanding. And it's cool that you were able to focus like you did. Like you were saying that you didn't really focus on the unit thing, and it seems like you've been pretty dedicated to your squireship at this point.
Yeah. I've actually seen kind of that pitfall a few times where people kind of want to do everything at once and then they get really burnt out. So I figure one thing at a time. I'm here for a long time. And I kind of want to be able to dedicate my time and do the best I can in every area instead of trying to do everything at once and kind of doing a mediocre job in multiple areas at one time.
Sure.
And, I just have a busy life outside of Bella as well, so I want to make sure that I have that kind of balance.
Well, I was speaking with your former knight now earlier, and he was saying that you have a couple of youngins that you're
Yes.
also trying to wrangle this whole time.
I do have 2 kids, teenagers.
Oh, lovely.
So, it's easier now that they're older. I see a lot of our fighters are just starting to have kids, and I remember that time of having the very young toddlers and babies and stuff, and I don't know if I could have pulled off going to events and, enjoying Belle and stuff with the babies around. It does get much easier after a while, so big shout out to them. It's not easy to try to balance that. And I'm glad to see my kids growing up and enjoying Belle as well.
Sure. Are they legacy kids?
My younger son actually just started his own practice because they're 8th graders and not quite old enough to play with the big kids yet. But they're out there every week and going crazy and beating each other up, which is amazing to watch. And just I love watching the young kids come in and enjoy it, and hopefully they will enjoy it for as long as I have and as much as I have.
Well, that's a great way of doing things, too. When I was just graduating from high school, I started a group called the Gladiators, and it was a way for younger guys, people who were in high school, or just high school, to get their bearings, to get their talents and skills kind of established somewhat before they came and joined the city field. We had some real rough and tumble guys in the beginning who were not necessarily good about trying to retain kids and younger folks. They were just very rough. And so if you wanted to succeed out there, you had to come out, ready to brawl. And a lot of people just couldn't hack it, not because they were weak or anything, but just because they hadn't been conditioned for it.
Yeah.
And so being able to say, hey, you've got 4 years to be able to soak all of this in, become confident in your abilities, steady on your feet before you go and join the big kids, like you say. So I think what your son is doing is perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah,
thing to do.
it's totally a self-motivated thing. We didn't tell him to do it or anything, and he just started having friends over after school, and the crowd kept growing of random kids in my backyard, and they're out there. They have 20-pound bows for backyard shooting, and they're out there blasting each other in the face with arrows and hitting each other with flails. And since we run the realm as well out of our house, we have this huge amount of loner gear, and
Perfect.
imagine just being a kid and having all the swords and shields that you want and all the bows and arrows, and so I see that that's really awesome for them, and they're having so much fun. So 100% worth.
Oh yeah, and if it keeps up, you're going to get really good blood from that. Our high school program continues to churn out quality fighters that.
To have the youth and the experience at the same time.
Oh, they're lethal.
Oh, they're going to be great.
One of my guys out here, Melon, is a recent graduate of high school and of the program, and he gives us vets in the realm a run for our money. Like, we've had to step on our game because we can't let him just
that cardio.
walk over us. Yeah, just and he weight lifts and everything. So he's got the youth, the spryness, the athleticism, and then of course the drive and training. Like, oh, he's a beast. He's a beast on that field. So outstanding.
It's exciting to see people come up like that.
It is. It is. And I'm sure you've seen quite a bit of that in the roles that you have played while being in here. Because, like I said, it was a treat to be able to witness your ceremony yesterday. I was walking by and I went, oh, "Who's this?" And I saw you all in the middle. And I was like, "Well, I gotta stay for this one, obviously." And it was, for one thing, I just have to say, it was a beautiful ceremony. It was very touching in many ways. So for one thing, the pageantry of it. It hit all the right buttons, I think, in a lot of ways. The presentations, oh my gosh, the lovely, amazing garb that you had made for yourself. There was just so much about that. How much did you help in the planning of that, and how much of that was just pure juggernaut?
We all very procrastinated in finalizing what the ceremony looked like. We've been talking about it for a few months, like what elements is it going to have, what do you want to talk about, what is it, what's the vibe overall? It's like, does it want to be super serious? Do we want to do traditional? And we decided not super serious because it's not really us, and we wanted something that was more us. So we went with the juggy, charismatic comedy style, which I think, was great. And he's always a great speaker. So we were lucky to have a knight who's just already, at this perfect moment ready to give a great speech and doesn't really have to fumble through things or read things too much. And he just does a great job no matter what. But, we kind of finalized it an hour before the ceremony.
I would not have thought that. Coming up, I was like, this looks really well rehearsed. This looks really well done. There were a lot of elements that have been brought in, So to hear that, kudos to y'all for pulling it together and putting on such a quality presentation. In addition to your elevation, that's a whole lot of balls to juggle at once,
And Sir Runa is my best friend, so that's why we decided to do double knighting. It was just how many people get to get knighted with their best friends. So it was super awesome to have that. But planning out the elements we picked out, we wanted it to reflect what we had done as far as the security stuff and arts and sciences. Did steal a few things from SCA. I am also a member of the SCA, and so I watch a lot of knightings.
Sure.
And I just really love the ending that they use for a lot of their ceremonies, which is until the world ends or death takes us. So I think that's really cool. So
metal.
I really wanted that in there. And a lot of the stuff does come from Juggy's ceremony, so that's the more traditional side of things. And I really liked a lot of stuff that was already in there. He was reading out his original printout of his ceremony, and was a lot of this is really great and applies to us and doesn't feel stuffy or forced. Yeah, so I really liked what he had there, so we didn't have to change a lot. And then the swords on the shoulders, that was also a thing from SCA that I thought was really cool. A way to physically represent the weight and the responsibility that comes with peerage, and the weight of lifting up your community. And so I thought that was a really cool thing to do, and it was also really scary.
All these swords coming down. And
that's why I wore a gorget. It's I love all of you, but maybe not trust you that much. It's slippery out there, because things could go wrong. So
that's cool as well, because it gives the community a chance to show their support.
Yeah, and I really
come up and say, "Hey,
I really wanted people to be involved." And normally, in the beginning, it was only for peerage to do that. It was other nights only, but it's peerage isn't for peerage. Peerage is for the community. So that's why I wanted to invite everyone, and I put out a Facebook blast, if you have a sword you want to be a part of my ceremony, come out. And I brought a bunch of extra swords and just found my friends and people who I had looked up to and people who I felt were big contributors to the community. I was hey, do you want to come and put a sword on me?
No, and I'm glad they did. I'm glad, again, it was one of the larger knighting ceremonies I've been to. I felt a very good portion of the event was there for that. And part of it was good advertising, I'm sure, but it also shows the incredible respect and the incredible support that you and Rune have had for this community.
Yes, I was very, not shocked, but very touched by the number of people that came out and the number of people who wanted to help. We had kind of a fiasco prior I got here, well, 7 hours away. We got here, we started unpacking the car, and my entire suitcase full of garb and all of my knighting regalia was at home.
Oh no.
My suitcase had been left at home when we packed the car, and I was losing my mind, and people stepped up immediately. I got loaner garb from friends. I had a stunt chain lined up because we were just going to go ahead and do the ceremony. I was not going to not get knighted because I didn't have my stuff. I had my surcoat and I had my shield, and everything else had been left at home. So it's like, we're just going to do it, and everybody just immediately came in and started helping and, you know, doing everything to make sure I got where I needed to be, and I appreciate that so much, and that's almost better than actually remembering my stuff. It's just, you know, to have some people step up and be so ready to help. It like really makes you feel loved, and it was an awesome thing.
No, and it seemed so. Your stuff didn't arrive at all.
It did eventually arrive.
Okay.
Runa's dad actually came up yesterday afternoon. Like, he got here probably like an hour and a half before nighting, and our friend, another fighter, was at home in San Ramon, and he was taking care of our cats. So he had a key to our house, which means he could get my suitcase. So he gave the suitcase to Runa's dad, and he brought it up. So that was like a really coordinated team effort, and it was amazing. And Twig, the fighter who was at home, and Sartorix offered to meet halfway in the middle to get my stuff. And I was like, please don't drive that far. That's like 10 hours of driving combined for you guys. Like, that's too much. But they were going to do it. Like, people were so ready to help.
Because you're in Northern California, right?
Yeah, we're in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Ooh.
So it was a wild ride.
I came down from Montana, but I wasn't trying to make somebody's and all the LA traffic and the.
Oh, that was rough. Not a fan of the LA traffic.
I've only experienced it twice now in my life, and I'd be just fine with that being it. I could just maybe get a private helicopter to get it out of that.
Well, we're pretty notorious for bad traffic too, but it's nothing like down here.
Yeah. So this process that you went through, I mean, obviously the ceremony was gorgeous. It turned out fantastic. But the ceremony was really just sort of the cherry on the top of this amazing cake that you baked, which was your squireship that kind of led to this moment. What parts of your squireship did you find the most challenging to carry forward?
Of all the elements that kind of go into building a well-rounded peer, I would say the actual like in-person field leadership, field command, that was one of the requirements, was the hardest for me. I am not a loud person, and I'm not really a commanding person. I'm not a bossy person. Like, I don't like to do that. So that was like out of my comfort zone big time. But like, I also felt like doing it was 100% worth it, even though it was like uncomfortable for me in the beginning, because I needed to develop that. And that's kind of the reason you do a squireship, so that you can learn new things and, you know, round yourself out with your talents and skills and just become a better member of the community who can offer more.
Sure.
So, but that was rough.
No, and it is for a lot of people. It's just like in America, the number one phobia is public speaking.
Yeah,
a lot
it's
of folks
good.
just really don't like getting up there and do it. I mean, if you can tell by my line of work, I don't mind it one bit at all. But, you know, it makes sense, especially you can be such a positive community member even without it. And so you're able to contribute where they come in all these ways, but when you're brought out of yourself, out of the shadows, into something like that, did you have like an echoer, like a caller that if you said, turn right, they would be like, turn right, like somebody with, or did you just develop the presence, the voice to be able to do that?
We had to like be the voice for it, and
Okay.
I mean, I can be loud, I just don't like to be loud, so I had to be loud, and like that's uncomfortable for me to just be like yelling commands at people, because it's just not really my personality. But part of it was also recruiting your army and like hyping things up, so it's a good exercise in communication, both like, you know, written communication over the internet and stuff, and then also just in-person communication with your, you know, your team and the other side, and figuring things out, and overall a good exercise, but a little scary.
Yeah. What parts did you find the most enriching? Like when you've gotten to this point and you're going to go forward, which things are going to stand out as like the sparkling notes?
Running the realm and actually like going into a leadership position after like kind of hanging back and just doing organizational stuff and being that person that people come to and people trust, and like making sure people get to practice, making sure people have garb if they need it for going to an event, and to be kind of like the realm mom and being in that role and being able to help new people who are just getting started, like that's super super enriching to me, because like you're starting something great for them, and you're making the difference, and you're making them come back. Like if nobody picks up that role of helping them get started or being the person that they can come to,
Sure.
then they might not come back.
Right.
And they're going to miss out on a lot.
And we're going to miss out a lot, because every new person that comes in is somebody who brings a different perspective, brings a different voice, and may end up being a positive contributor to the community, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we have one of our noobs here. He's been in like 3 months, and he got out to the event, and he's sitting right outside. And now he's doing calligraphy and stuff, and it's just so cool to see people like just pick up new interests and learn new things super fast and just jump right in. So.
Right. Well, because it is,
Awesome.
it's more than just a game, what we do here. It also is like the classes and the crafts and the meeting people. And a lot of people, like, this is a foundational part of their lives. Like something like a knighting can be something that you look back on. It can be just as important as graduating from high school, because it is again, a recognition from your community of something big like that.
Yeah.
I know when I received my title at Battle for the Ring forever ago, it was one of those walking on air moments. I was loving life for like the next forever, just because I'd achieved this thing, been recognized for this thing, but also knew that it wasn't done. My work was not done. This was leading someplace else. This was not a destination, but just another step on the way of the journey.
Absolutely.
So, in that same mind, on this journey, you've made this step. You have your chain, beautiful chain, by the way. What's ahead? What's the next part of the journey?
I do see myself in some areas going more from like a competitor in arts and sciences, because I have competed in almost every ANS competition in the last 9 years and won a lot of them. And this year I decided to become a judge and probably retire, I guess, from competing, because I'm also a professionally made garb, and at some point it becomes kind of unfair. But just moving on to more of like a mentor or teacher role, and just to help organize things for arts and sciences, because arts and sciences is obviously a huge part of like my path as a squire and as a peer, and just also stepping more into organization for running the realm. And I'm doing that now, but I want to start building things out and not just maintaining but growing, and coming up with new ideas, and just being, like I said, more the mom role. Like now I feel like a vet fighter, for the first, I don't know, I felt like a noob for like 9 years, but
Yeah, I think it's 9 years.
I kind of did.
Could start calling yourself a vet.
But like when you start becoming people start coming up to you and asking you things, like things, you're like, oh, maybe I do know things, and it's time for me to like step into that role of like actively making sure that people have what they need, or like that things are growing, or that new ideas are being implemented that are good for the community. So kind of that's the next step, went from like more learning to now teaching. Yeah.
Do you have anybody in mind? Do you have anybody, are you already picking squires, or are you just kind of letting it ride for a second and getting used to the role?
I was actually supposed to pick a retainer as part of my squireship, but with the lack of events and things, the kind of a lack of new people, we don't see a lot of new faces yet, because people want events, right? And that's what gets people to come in and sort of stick around. But right now, Battle for the Ring is the only California event that's been running. We do have one coming up in April, but there just hasn't really been new people. And most of the people that have been interested in peerage are already squired. So I really haven't been able to find someone yet, but I've definitely been scouting at this event, looking for those faces that are continuously volunteering, and I always see them helping with something like those are the people who need to be picked up and given that chance. And like, do you want to know about, peerage, or is this something you'd be interested in? So I'm definitely scouting for those new shiny faces who are, just full of energy and ready to help and ready to learn.
So it's when you're looking at potential new people, the folks that you want to bring into the peerage, your focus is not on combat necessarily, but more on that service element.
I think it needs to be all, and like not a lot of people have all. Like, I'd say there's like 4 main things, which would be combat, arts and sciences, service, and leadership. And I'm really looking for someone who maybe not necessarily has all of those skills yet, but is eager to learn and is willing to put in the time. Like, a lot of these things, like arts and sciences, not everyone is a born artist, and you don't need to be a born artist. Those things are taught, and they are learned, and they're practiced. And anyone can be a great garber, or a great calligrapher, or a great weapon maker. It just takes dedication. So an eagerness to learn is more important, I think, than already having that skill set.
I think it's why a lot of like football clubs or soccer clubs, they want those newer fighters, or newer players, because they don't have bad habits. You can
That's fair too.
take that new and excited, eager person and kind of mold them into the kind of community member that you want them to be before the rest of the community corrupts them, right?
And they're a new set of eyes and a new set of ears, and they're like, because we've been looking at things kind of like the same way, like Bella is a certain way and everything is done a certain way. We're so used to looking at it. When new people come in, they have a completely different perspective. Sure. They're like, well, why don't we do this? And I'm like, oh, I never thought about doing that. That's a great idea. So having these, like, new people with new ideas who are seeing things with a fresh set of eyes, I think is super valuable and helps us grow and helps us continue to evolve to be better.
Sure. I agree as well. Like, there have been a lot of rules, particularly implemented recently, safety rules, that I have been a huge fan of. For instance, bloody noses from javelins don't really happen anymore. And I'm totally all right with that, because I have had quite a few bloody noses from javelins. But when we're seeing this fresh perspective, this new, this progress that we're talking about, we're also trying to preserve traditions as well. Like, for instance, the very traditional elements of your knighting ceremony were things that go back throughout all of the lineages, back to when Numenor first started really doing this back in the Way Web. What traditions do you think should be kept, no matter what?
I mean, I really appreciate the actual, like, visual impact of the elements of knighthood, like those things that are traditional, the white belt, the chain, all those things, because they signify someone who has the ability and the experience and the willingness to put in work or to help someone, and they are somebody that you can count on to do something. So, like, those signifiers that are traditional, I think, are still really important and help newcomers be able to recognize someone that can help them out with whatever they need. Other elements that are traditional that I like.
And even just as the community as a whole, the sport as a whole, like, what are things that we've had that really work and that you think should stay, or is everything kind of in flux? Just anything can be progressed.
Actually, there's something I was just talking about that I really missed that we used to really go hard on. It was like realm battles.
Yeah.
We don't really do that too much anymore. But I love that because, like, being in a unit is one thing, and it's also kind of exclusive. It's not for everyone, right? But, like, everybody has their realm. These are your people you see every week. These are your friends. It's basically your family. Yep. And to go out and, like, fight your heart out for your friends is so fun. And to practice all the stuff you've been doing at practice, and I just always super enjoyed those, and definitely miss those round battles.
I agree with you 110% there. I have gone to many an event where the realm battle was more satisfying in many ways than the unit battle was. For that same reason, you all come from the same place. You're used to practicing together. Like the folks that I came from the same realm, even if we're not in the same unit anymore. I move left, they move right, we know...
You know each other so well, you're like predicting their move, and you know that you can fill in here because they're going to go this way. Yep. So I really love that. I don't think that feasts at an event are a tradition that needs to be kept. I think at some point it becomes unmanageable, and it's a lot of stress on ECs, and it's a big expense for the event, and I think award ceremonies are better for that time when we're handing out awards and stuff. And I like the idea of camps kind of feeding their people and having dinners with their friends at night and not having to wait in a giant line and going through and getting food and trying to find a seat and stuff. Right. So the kind of phasing out of feasts and a lot of events, most of it was like initiated by COVID, but like I don't think it's something we will miss, really. So, and having a lot of friends who are UC, it's like, to see the feast kind of make its way out is not a problem for me. And also so many people have allergies and, food intolerances and stuff. Like, it gets really hard to do the feast. So I like the idea of a separate award ceremony and just going out there to support your friends and not having to wait in a giant line and deal with all the food stuff.
That makes sense. And it's, like you said, the post-COVID era, when not standing in line and everybody grabbing and touching on the same food. Like, I'm 110% with you. That seems to... there were a lot of things in the pre-COVID era that were fairly normal, but they were also kind of gross. I noticed a lot more people, for any sort of drinks, they'll bring like their own drinking vessel.
Oh yeah, we all used to just drink out of the bottle.
And everybody left with event plague, which was like a combination of a cold, a flu, maybe some strep thrown in there just for
every time.
Ugh. So I'm okay not having that before. Well, before we finish up here, because I'm sure you have other things to do with your time as well, I just wanted to ask, let's say somebody is starting this journey, or thinking about starting this journey, the journey that you have made this step on, only to continue on further. Why should they do this? And what would be a good mindset, do you think, to come into it for success?
It really depends on personality type. Like, you can be a great, well-rounded Belegarth who's a huge contributor to Belegarth as a whole without a peerage. It's obviously not necessary. But there are people who need more structure, and that was me. Like, I really wanted to improve in these areas, and I wanted to push myself in the areas where I was weaker. But I'm also kind of, like, all over the place, and I get distracted easily. So it really helped me focus on what I wanted to become and how I was going to get there. And also, when you are working towards peerage, people really definitely, like, come out of the woodwork to help you learn things, other peers. And you have so many great resources, and I feel like you don't quite get that kind of support if you're just someone who wants to know something. Like, if their squires need to know, they're going to be helping their squires first. So if you are that person who wants those resources and wants guidance and wants some structure, like, the peerage is a great place to get that.
Sure. No, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you could rarely find a better resource than Sir Juggernaut.
Absolutely.
Like, the two of you, Sir Runa and yourself, and then Sir Juggernaut, you guys are just awesome. And I cannot say that enough. But Dame Freya, I appreciate you so much coming on the show.
Thank you so much for asking me to do this. It's been really fun.
And I look forward to seeing you in the future.
Absolutely.
Sir Juggernaut the Bard.
Hello.
How are you doing today, sir?
I could not be better.
Now, before we get into the real matter of what I wanted to speak to you about, which is the outstanding 2 new Unites that you've helped elevate, I wanted to know a little bit about you.
Absolutely. So I have been, my name is Luke, and I live in Idaho, and drove down here with my good friends, but I am originally... My sword fighting career started in Utah in a group called the Watchmen of Erduaf. And I started there in about 1996, and was part of a group called the Wolves. And it was there that I went to Ragnarok 13. I went to the first 3 Chaos Wars, 1, 2, and 3. And I got squired in 98 to a gentleman named Turin, who was the first knight of Utah. And Utah has an interesting past. Sword fighting came to Utah by a gentleman named Jay, who was from Maryland, and who fought with a group called the Aratari, who are a dagger hero group. And Jay moved to Utah and wanted to start his own thing, and he called it Battle Guard. But it used all the same rules as dagger here. And at the same time, a gentleman named Thane moved from Illinois, where he had been fighting with a group called Numenor, and he moved to Idaho. And then started these two parallel groups began at the same time. One in Idaho with Thane, one in Utah with Jay from Dagger here. And we eventually made contact with each other, started doing some crossover events in the mid-90s, and that's when I got involved. And then Belegarth was sort of abandoned when they realized we were using the Dagger here playset, and we're like, we're just Dagger here. And then we were all just Dagger here. And it was at that time that Thane had knighted someone named Cedric, who was a sort of a new fighter in Idaho, and Cedric then knighted Turin to start knighthood down in Utah, be the seed to start it in Utah, and that's when I was a 16-year-old kid, and I squired to Turin. So that was me until the 90s, and then I moved to California in 1999, and was inactive for a couple of years because I was serving a Mormon mission in Bulgaria, which is why I speak Bulgarian. When I came back, there was no one in California at all doing foam fighting, Belegarth or Dagger here. And when I was gone, I found out the sport split in two.
No,
I came back and I said, "What happened?" And everyone said, "Hey, by the way, we're not Dagger here anymore. We're Belegarth." And I was like, "What's a Belegarth? And why are we Belegarth, not Dagger here?" We're like, "Well, because you're from Utah, and Utah and Idaho are Belegarth, not Dagger here." I was like, "Says who?" They're like, "Well, says all of us." I was like, "Okay." So I went to California, and the only person in California at the time was a gentleman named Mordrock, who is a very ancient Dagger here fighter. And he was down in the LA area, and that was it. There's no one else here. So I was thinking, what can I do to help start up foam fighting? And I got a big boost because a couple of Numenor fighters moved out for work. Their names were Darklax and Rain and Selrak, Spief, and there was another one, Artemis, who was a knight of Numenor. And they moved out there, and Kyrax moved out too. Kyrax being the biggest boon for us. And we started a little San Francisco group called Belegarth. This would have been in the early 2000s. And then a lot of the Numenor crew moved again to LA. But Belegarth really was the seed that started all of what is now commonly referred to as Norcalia. And
like the greater realm.
The greater realm of Norcalia. And they really, sprouted from there. And that was...
For people who don't necessarily know what that is,
sure.
A brief definition of Norcalia.
Norcalia. So Norcalia was for a long time a sort of confederation of smaller realms that would go to events and fight as a large realm together. And we would host what we called moots. And a moot would be, basically all of us agree we're all going to go to a practice of another realm in different weeks. So we're all going to go to this practice this week and not our own practice, so that we could have a large day event, sort of impromptu day event. And we fought together, we trained together, we had a general army. Sir Shatterson was the general of Norcalia, so that when we went to battle for the ring and we're all together, he would help lead us all. And there was about a 2 to 3 year period where it was extremely cohesive. And, and then the realm started taking on more of their individual identities and less. But Norcalia is still a big entity, but I would say it's more of like a region, like the Balkans,
right,
or something like that.
Sure.
But there's a lot of sentimentality. Anyway, Belegarth was that first one that spread out, and Kyrax made friends with folks at Ren fairs and other people. And a group called Melenorod got started, which was a Dagger here group, the only one in sort of a sea of Belegarth. And they would move, and just it spread like wildfire. So that's, I would say, the majority of my, I consider myself a student and a squire, really learning when I was in Utah. And then I felt like my career and the work I did building happened in Northern California. And now I'm sort of like in my golden age retirement years in Idaho, where I live today. Just enjoying myself, having a lot of cigars, and trying to support the people who are there.
And this amazing tent, by the way. I know you guys can't see it, but I'm in this it's an amazing walk-in tent with carpets and comfy chairs, and it's away from the rain, which I'm sure you can hear in the background. So, yeah,
This is the
life.
Jugger Hut. This is what is referred the Jugger Hut. I've been carting this to events primarily as a place. You'll see drums everywhere. We primarily come in here to make music. It's our the music hall. So that when the best place to make music is by the fire at night with lots of people, but this is the second best place. So yeah, if you came last night, you would have heard a lot of musicians playing, drumming, and that is probably my peak happiness at an event.
I feel that.
So yeah, that was very, very long-winded version. I'm not part of any units. I was knighted about 4 years ago by Turin, who, 20 years later, I was a squire for 20 years, and Turin had then retired from the game, lived up in Portland. And 5 years ago, he flew down from Portland and knighted me, and then flew home. It was a very special thing to complete that experience. Although I do not recommend 20-year squireships at all. It's a bad idea.
I imagine that's. I feel like I'm stringing my apostle along for the fact that he's been in it for 5 years.
Yeah, well, everyone has their own path, I guess.
That's true.
I guess I shouldn't apologize for my path. It is my term of service was in Norcalia for a long time, trying to help put that together and support those people. So
It seems to be a very successful region.
yeah, they've done incredible, and they're now bouncing back from the pandemic. And I will say, it makes me very happy that the two squires that I just knighted are going to remain as resources to Norcalia.
Nice.
They both live in Norcalia, and I view knighthood as being, and not just knights, any of these peerages to be, you're creating pillars. Using this tent as a metaphor, which is the metaphor I always use. I view Belegarth in this sport as a big tent, and the individuals as tent poles keeping the tent up. And if there are no poles, there's no tent. It falls over.
It's just canvas.
It's just canvas that's not doing anything and not helping anyone. So my goal is to find more tent poles to hold up the tent.
I love that.
So I hope that Runa and Freya, and they have been, will continue to be that for Norcalia.
Well, they have shown nothing but excellence, even up until this point. And so,
Yeah.
title or no title, I think that we can I hope for a very bright future for the sport.
I'm right there with you.
But before we talk about those two amazing individuals, I did want a quick aside. It's interesting that we can both trace our lineage back to Cedric.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So, I mean, it is cool. I was telling someone about, what is knighthood in Belegarth? And I'm like, well, on the very basic level, it's a fantasy LARP with a theme. You've chosen to be a knight. There's plenty of other types of warrior cultures in history that you could have chosen to LARP as. But maybe because, but for some reason in this sport, so many have chosen that theme, and those who choose it have a lot of uniformity about the way they conduct themselves, as far as the type of garb, belts, chains, things like that. So it has a lot of consistency even throughout the country. So because of its popularity, because of its consistency, it sort of does take on an almost institutional meaning.
It does.
Even though it in no way is codified in the Book of War or anything like that, but the fact of its consistency and uniformity, it has become like a sub-institution within the game.
Very true.
Well, at least that's how I feel about it.
And something, like you said, that should be holding it up and not holding it back with these tent poles ideas. And with that, I'd like to talk about these two wonderful people that you've just elevated and kind of the process that you went through with them. And, of course, Happy Daddy sensation, to see fantastic new individuals be elevated like this.
So, these are the first people that I have knighted.
Oh!
I was knighted myself 5 years ago. So the lineage I come from in Utah, Turin, the idea was that knights had squires and squires had pages or retainers. So, and it was very common to have this retainer, and the knight wouldn't take the retainer. The squire would take the retainer, but only when the squire was at the very end of their squireship, the last 5 to 6 months, as sort of practice to having a squire of their own. A retainer was sort of practice to doing that, and that was the idea. And so I did that, and I took on two folks. I took on two folks as retainers, Freya and Three Bears, as when I was a squire. And then when I got knighted, I elevated them to be squires themselves, not retainers. So that was a pattern I followed from when I was raised. So, in the last 2 years before I was squired, I took on another big project, which I was passionate about, and that was an order. It was called the Order of Norcalia. And the idea behind this project was, if squires are accountable to knights, who are knights accountable to? And the idea was, if we would make an order based on some tenets that we could all agree upon, then people would join the order. And it could be a place not only to hold people accountable, but also to provide a community if others were interested. And it wouldn't just be knights, it was war masters, it would be any one of the guilds, seneschals, artificers, I'm forgetting, chroniclers. And so it was this idea of peerage. It was an order of peerage was the idea. We spent a long time working on that, and it ended up not coming to fruition at the end. But because it was a 2-year project, there was a lot of resources we developed that we were able to salvage. And one of those resources that we salvaged was the list that squires would use to become knights. And it was something that all the project team, and there was about 8 to 10 of us on the team, squires, knights, war masters, apprentices, parts of the peerage of the guilds, we all contributed to this list, and we argued over it about how much in this. So when I took them on as squires, I sort of pulled that from the burning wreckage, and I said, I'm taking this with me. And it's those lists that Freya and Runa used as part of their development, and my other squires currently use as well. So that was part of their path, was going through that list.
I think it's we all have fairly common things that we require. I require very very similar things of my apostles that you do of your squires. We require service, not just to the realm, which is very important, but to the sport as a whole, through volunteering at events and volunteering for positions of leadership and that sort of thing. We encourage some form of martial proficiency, whether that be in one style or the other, or a combination thereof. And then, of course, there's the idea of the mentorship, which I with my apostles I value very much as well, because we're not just creating people who should be good community members, but also good leaders. The tentpole analogy.
The tentpole, that's it.
So let's talk about them,
a lot of similar things on that list. All those things are on mine. It's again, themes, honor, how you conduct yourself, knowing the rules. Yep. Service to your realm and to the sport and to events, things like that.
Well, they seem to be very individual too. Like, did that influence? Because when you look at the two of them and the heraldry they've chosen and the way that they volunteer and serve, I imagine that both of them require a little bit different attention and a little bit different instruction.
Well, so Freya has 2 teenage children, and has a full-time job. Runa is a police officer, and got that job during the pandemic. Went through an academy and applied for it, and so they have. And Runa has no children, so they have extremely different lives, and but they both deeply care about the sport and deeply care about the community. And when I look at who I want to, and I've had a lot of people ask to go through the squire journey, and I've told them no for a variety of reasons. But when I look at those two, and I see such a dedication to what I call it, feeling the yoke of responsibility. Some people feel the weight of that. Others don't have a care in the world. Things could be falling around them. There could be a whole lot like, hey, can someone help pick up trash? And be like, just walk on past. They do not feel the yoke of responsibility of saying, I should do that, right? And I could tell that both of them, I could feel the weight of what they should be doing. And I liked that sense of responsibility, which is why I, approached them and said, hey, you're already doing so much that is so hard and really impossible to train. You either have to feel it or you don't feel it. Right? You can train someone how to swing a sword,
right? But
you can't train them how to care. Right?
So you approached them, and so
I'm trying to remember. So I definitely approached Runa. Freya approached me.
Okay.
Freya approached me. I approached Runa because I think people were considering Runa for squireship, and I wanted her. I don't know how to say that differently. I was like, no. Runa is amazing.
Right.
I want to squire her. I don't want anyone else to do it. I have a vision for what I want to do with Runa.
Sure.
and I'm sure she would be very successful with whoever. But I wanted to be the one to walk with that path. It was a very awkward conversation. If you can imagine, like, an elementary school kid, like, will you be my girlfriend? Like how awkward. It was just as awkward.
Check yes or no.
Like, yeah, that's it. It was just as awkward as you might imagine. And I like kept trying to like say it differently, and only made it more awkward. And she was like, "Yes, Juggernaut. Yes, I will be your squire." Yes. And I was like, "Cool, thanks." And like skipping off. Yeah, it was a very strange. I realized that moment. I was like, I have no idea how I'm going to approach this. I just walked up to them and just began. You know. I haven't thought about that in a long time. That makes me laugh. Yeah, but Freya approached me, and then I approached Druna. And I also really loved the idea of having women as knights and women as squires, because I think that knighthood and knights get a bad rap for many things, and there's not a lot of diversity. Well, actually, I do think there is now. I think maybe 10 to 15 years ago there wasn't.
Oh, yeah, no, there certainly wasn't.
But I feel like, we're doing a lot better job now. So having more, like, gay people who are knights, and people who are of color, and, people who are trans, and people, when you have representation in this highly visual role, then you're going to have parts of your community that think, oh, that is me.
Right.
Like, I could do that. Not like, oh, that's a bunch of other people who are better than me,
right,
and I don't belong there.
There's just a bunch of cis white boys that got their own little frat.
Exactly. When they see representation in highly decorated roles, they think that's something I could do, right? And I just really love that idea of inclusion, where they feel like they could belong.
No, I find that to be extremely noble, because the more voices we can bring to the table from different perspectives, the better that we make everything.
Right.
And it's not just the echo chamber that can be created by one group or the other being there by themselves.
Right. I have 3 other squires still. I had 5 squires yesterday, and the other ones are white dudes. So it's not just women. We're definitely well represented.
I mean, regardless, you're looking for talent.
Well, that is 100% right. I look for them for their qualities first and foremost as individuals, and they were overflowing with those qualities.
Well, I'm sure that you've congratulated them and of course enthusiastically supported them along this journey. But if there was something else that you could say to them, what might it be?
Take squires. I don't like to see peerage. Well, that's maybe a heavy-handed thing to say. I love seeing when knights, war masters, guild members take squires, take apprentices, because it is one of the most meaningful and intimate ways that you can help build the sport. Mm-hmm. Is you can show up to an event, you can show up to Realm, you can do stuff, but when you take someone under your wing and you help them and guide them, that you're investing in someone who's going to invest in others.
Right.
It isn't
paying it forward.
You're paying it forward in a big way, and it can be. There's a lot of like, what do they call that? Imposter syndrome, where you think I am not good enough to be a knight, or I'm not good enough to squire someone. And at the end of the day, it's the squire's journey, not yours.
Right.
You're there just to help them, but it's their journey, and they're going to walk the path, right? But yeah, invest in others. That would be my advice to them. But I think I yelled at them a lot, so maybe that wasn't the best thing, because I do try to trumpet that a lot.
Well, different people have different styles, right? And I guess kind of the same idea. If you've got people who are either approaching their knighthood or who have recently achieved it, take squires.
Right.
Obviously, is a good one. Be responsible to our sport. Is there anything else that we should be aware of as titled persons in order to encourage others, encourage growth in the realm and in the community at large?
Well, yeah, I would say, first off, I think there are sometimes, there certainly has been negative stigmas about knights that have had bad behavior. And there certainly has been negative stigma about knights being in charge of things, being the boss, and everyone else is sort of under them because they're the boss. Some of that is earned, and I think some of that is not quite fair. I think when you have somebody who's very personally active and they love doing things, it's naturally for that person to have really good garb and armor and weapons because they spend all their time and money on those things.
Sure.
You know, if I was hanging out with someone who's really into board games or magic cards or video games, they would probably have the best stuff because that's the things that they love to do the most. And equally so, it's also common for those people to end up being in charge because if no one's going to show up, it's going to be them who shows up, right? And so you have these sort of like these consequential actions that can create a persona of someone who has like really fancy garb, really fancy stuff, also is in charge. And a lot of people will look at that person and say, you're power seeking. It's like, no, they're just, this is the thing they like to do a lot, and they're the one who's willing to put in the most time to do it. Sure. And so you should never, if you are one of these peers, one of these knights, you should never feel bad about your garb or your chain or your this or your that. Like, these are things that, you know, a chain isn't a fancy piece of jewelry. It is a heavy irritation to remind you of your oath. Right. A nice fancy squire tabard doesn't mean you're in charge. It is a reminder that you're bearing someone else's symbol, and so if you mess up, there's someone who's directly responsible for that. So these are like tokens to remind you. I've yet to meet any knight or squire who's like, yes, this represents how cool I am.
Right.
I have yet to encounter, and maybe it's out there, but these are symbols that, you know, remind you of your duty.
I do as well.
So don't be ashamed of all the work and effort that you put into it, and also don't be a jerk. And also don't be a jerk.
That's a huge one in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, Sir Juggernaut, I appreciate you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
And I think that your squires are lucky to have you as an instructor, and I look forward to seeing what your remaining 3 are going to accomplish as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
That's our show. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't had enough of the art of wargaming in your life, you can find us on Facebook and Instagram, where I occasionally post funny and educational memes. If you want to get in touch with the show directly, you can email us at artofwargamingpodcast@gmail.com with any questions, comments, or concerns that you might have. Also be sure to check out all of our sister shows on the Earworm Network, including General Nerdery, Word Balloons, Fried Squirms, and more. We're working hard on having something for everyone. And again, you can find those at earworm.com. That's EARVVYRM. You can also find that in the show notes. But for now, this has been Yaga Malark, signing off.